Welcome back, everyone, to Mythellaneous. This is Mythellaneous, the Top Men Files. I think we officially titled it that after the Ark of the Covenant episode.
Yes. Yeah.
So we are calling this the Top Men Files because we are going through all of the Indiana Jones, whatchamacallits, MacGuffins.
Mm-hmm.
Getting ready for Dial of Destiny. And I mean all because we will be talking about whatever the Dial of Destiny is. Originally, I did have a little bit about it in this report, but I'm not going to do it this time because now the movie has been seen to too many people and everyone knows what it is. Except for me, because I don't want to spoil. But I am Brandon T. McClure, and with me, as always, on this journey, indulging me on this journey, I should say, is Sparks Whitty.
It's me.
Sparks, you and I both listened to the first season of Mythellaneous a bit.
Oh, yeah.
To kind of remind ourselves about what the show was.
Okay, like I don't want to like give myself too much credit. I did not re-listen to like episodes of the show. I just went back and scanned to the endings to try and be like, did we ever come up with an outro? The answer is no.
No, the answer is no. We never came up with an outro.
I just kept making puns.
If there are any Mythellaneous heads out there who remember this show from 3 years ago, more? No, it hasn't. No, it wasn't.
Yeah, I just looked at the date. I just looked at it.
You're right, because it was before the pandemic.
Yeah.
Damn it. Shit, man, we're old. We've been doing a podcast for 7 years. I shouldn't say that. All right. Anyway, so last week, if you guys haven't listened to it yet or watched it yet, because this show is now video, go check it out. We talked about the Ark of the Covenant and kind of the mythological based stories, the legends surrounding it, the kind of true life history surrounding it, and we're going to keep going in that vein for the rest of the MacGuffins. But this week, the Sankara Stones. Now, Sparks.
Yeah.
What do you know about the Sankara Stones?
Nothing other than what's in the movie.
Great. Would it surprise you to know that they're not real?
No, because you told me this off camera.
but pretend for the camera.
Oh, I'm sorry. What?
Yes. Okay. Well, if there's really nothing to talk about beforehand, I guess we should get into it, right?
Do they say in the movie that there are 7, but we only see 3?
There's 5, but we only see 3.
5, but we only see 3. That's just weird. So
because I rewatched the movies this week. Again, I rewatched the movies a lot. I've watched these movies a lot this year. Then the movie, I think I took this out of my report. They say there's 5. The place, the village that Indiana is in has 1 of them, and the temple has 2. But underneath the temple are 2 more, which is why the kids are digging.
Right.
So the kids are digging for the last 2.
In theory,
yeah. But anyway, okay. So let's get right into it. So my report starts thusly. My report starts thusly. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is an interesting film within the canon of the franchise. For me, anyway. There are a few reasons for this, including its darker tone and its decision to be a prequel to Raiders, but the reason why we're here today is what I believe, the biggest reason it sticks out. I believe that Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom sticks out more than the others, and it's because of the Sankara Stones. Out of all the MacGuffins in the Indiana Jones films, the Sankara Stones are the only ones that don't exist in history, legend, mythology, or theology, which means we have no reason to talk about it on this show. But I've committed to this bit.
All right, everyone. Great episode. See you next time.
Yeah, see you next time. But I've committed to this bit. So here we go. Before we get into this report is going to be a little shorter than the others because I don't want to bore too many people with historical accounts. We're a mythology-based show. I didn't want to deal with too much of the historical context of what I'm going to be talking about. I have enough to kind of give people what kind of a background of what these stones are meant to be.
Sure. Right. I mean, anybody listening to this is not interested in history.
But like most of the reason is because like there's a lot of pieces that make up what the Sankara Stones came from. And I didn't want to get too much into the different pieces. I wanted to kind of give everybody a full picture of what came together to create the Sankara Stones. But things like the Holy Grail will probably be a long report, and Crystal Skull is going to be an interesting report. I don't know how long it's going to be, but it'll be interesting. I don't mean to imply this isn't going to be interesting.
But he did.
I'm sure someone will find it interesting. I certainly did. Okay, so the Sankara Stones don't exist in any mythological account. So where did they come from? After all, Lucas and Spielberg wanted Indiana to go after historical artifacts. So why is this so different? The short answer is, I don't know.
All right.
I have no idea. I actually cannot find any account as to who came up with the stones and why. I have no clue. I've looked because we know where Lucas and where Lucas got the idea for the Ark of the Covenant, but no idea where the stones came from. Mm-hmm. No one has said, "Hey, this was my idea. Hey, this is why I did it." Just no clue. We do know, the only thing that is known is that Gloria Katz and Willard Huyck, who are
I'm not looking at it. I don't know.
That's fine. Well, it's hard. It's Huyck.
Sure.
Yeah. So they were chosen to write the film, because they're the writers of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and they were chosen because of their interest in Indian mythology. So that's they're probably the source of where this came from. But I didn't find anything on why they didn't just use like a real artifact, like a real mythological artifact that exists somewhere. Exists in quotation marks. If anyone, I've called to action. If anyone is listening or watching this and knows anything about this, please let me know. I'd love to learn about it. It's fascinating to me that they just decide that they pulled this out of their ass.
Right.
Lucas did say this in 2021, though. Quote, "We try to keep it within the realm of reality, but stretch it just a bit to make it more interesting and have more fun with it. And also, it's based on some kind of real mythology that exists that people actually believe in. Sankara Stones was a bit of a reach," he laughs. "But in Asia, it's not. As many people believe in the Sankara Stones as believe in the Holy Grail, that's just Western Eastern audiences." What a weird quote, right?
Because they are not real.
Because they're not real. It's so fascinating to me. So
I can talk out of my butt about Eastern Asian culture because nobody here cares.
I'm so fascinated. I became like a what do they call it? Like a detective, like a podcast detective of trying to figure out, like, why did he say that? Where did this what? Anyway, I'm not sure what he's trying to say here, honestly.
Essentially, the Sankara Stones, if you look in the books, it's basically like Asia's Holy Grail.
Yeah, sure. Also, it's not. I'll get into that. I'm bringing it up on the screen, by the way. I forgot to do that.
George.
We have this box.
George.
What
a mistake.
I've now put up, for the audio listeners, I've now put up the picture of Indiana with the Sankara Stones in the temple of Doom, some might say. Okay, so I'm not sure what he's trying to say there. I've read this a few times and it never makes much sense. There's no such thing as the Sankara Stones.
Right.
Or is there? Sparks. Are you intrigued yet? Are you intrigued yet?
You said no. You
Okay.
said that they don't exist.
Okay. I mean, I maybe made the preamble a bit too long here, but whatever. I'm submitting to it. Here's the story as told in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Indiana, Willie, and Short Round are taken to an Indian village. There, he's asked to help them retrieve the stolen totem that they call a Sivalinga. They say they've stolen our Sivalinga. Indiana asks if it was a smooth stone with 3 lines across it, to which they say yes. It's only after one of the children shows up with a piece of parchment that Indiana speculates that the missing stone is one of the 5 Sankara stones.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Indiana starts the story by explaining that 5 stones were given to a priest named Sankara by the Hindu god Shiva on Mount Kalisa. The story that the movie tells says that Sankara used the stones to convert many people in India to the worship of Shiva. He does say to go forth and battle evil, but that's kind of the implication, is to convert people.
Sure.
Okay, so I want to backtrack. I want to backtrack a bit there because that story is a clue to the real life origins of the Sankara Stones. The village elder doesn't say, "Help me find my Sankara stone." He says, "Help me find my Sivalinga."
Mm-hmm.
So let's start there. The Hindu religion does worship something similar to the Sankara stones. The smooth surface rock with 3 lines across it are reminiscent of stones called Shiva lingams. I've also read that they're sometimes called lingams, just lingams, or Sivalinga. There you go, which is what he says in the movie.
Right.
This is the pronunciation the movie goes with. There are stones of these are stones of cryptocrystalline quartz containing many mineral impurities. They come from my phone's blown up. They come from the Narmada River in western India, where they are gathered by villagers and polished into their traditional elliptical egg shape. It is said that they fell there from heaven, and are considered a symbol of the god Shiva.
Okay.
So not from nowhere. They created a kind of a variant of a Sivalinga for the Sankara stones.
Well, it sounds like to an extent that all they did was change the name to Sankara because they wanted something American audiences would pronounce.
But the elder says, so the elder mistakes what is a Sankara stone for a Sivalinga. Is what basically happened.
Does he mistake it, or is that just different terms?
Oh, I always, because after doing this report, I assumed that the elder thought what he had was a Sivalinga, but what he actually had was a Sankara stone. Because they're similar, right? It's the elliptical egg shape with 3 lines, three white lines across it.
Right, and I feel like I don't think that they're supposed to be definitionally different things in terms of the film. I think they just have Indy say Sankara stones because that's like the more common Western term for them in the story of the film. So that when Indy says it and when Harrison Ford has to say it, he's not there going because Harrison Ford doesn't like pronouncing gibberish. We know this.
That's a really good point and might actually be what happened there. I maybe gave them too much credit. Okay. So yeah, so it's an elliptical egg-shaped stone with 3 white lines that are considered part of the god Shiva.
Sure.
Since this is a mythological podcast, I'll give you guys a bit of Shiva.
All right.
Shiva deserves Shiva's a he, his own report. So I don't have a lot here. I just kind of have like a baseline here. He is the Hindu god of destruction, but more than that, he is the god of change. Hindus believe that Shiva's destruction brings about positive change in the world, and that he will destroy the world in order to recreate it. Important to note in relation to this report is that one of the names of Shiva is Shankara. We're getting a little closer.
Yeah.
I'm going to cap it there, though, and again, because it deserves a little report, I will kind of go back a little bit. We'll kind of circle back to that a little later in the report, though. So, lingam means sign in Sanskrit. Sanskrit. I always thought it was Sanskrit. It's Sanskrit.
Yeah, you don't pronounce the P.
Yeah, there's no P actually. At least in the thing that I picked up. These stones are representations of Shiva and are found in every shrine and monastery that worships the god, as they are meant to honor him. It is often represented within a disc-shaped platform. So think about like a circular dish with like a little spout coming out for the water to seep out of.
Okay.
Called the yoni. That's called the yoni. This is considered the feminine counterpart. The yoni consists of a flat dish-like element in which the lingam is placed. Together, they symbolize the merging of microcosmos and macrocosmos, the divine eternal process of creation and regeneration, and the union of the feminine and the masculine that recreates all of existence. It does seem to be intended to be a phallic imagery. So think of basically the stones that we're seeing on the screen there, placed in a hole that's on a dish, and it's meant to. It looks like the intention is it's supposed to be phallic in nature.
Sure.
Really interesting idea, like the creation of their creation and the creation and destruction, creating all of reality, and in the way that look like that. It's so fascinating. I want
to be a penis.
All to be a penis. I want to dive more into Shiva someday. It's a good thing I have a mythological podcast.
Good thing.
All right. Sometimes a follower of Shiva will carry one around, so there's smaller versions of them. The stones are often used in meditation. They're used for healing ceremonies and rituals. There are multiple types, which includes a wearable one, so like small ones that you can wear around your neck. There's priests that carries them around, things like that. They all have their own names, and I don't have all the names written down because it would just be me spouting words I can't pronounce for 5 minutes, and I don't want to do that.
Sure.
Moving on to the mythology of the film, though, if you recall, Indy talks about a priest named Sankara who climbed Mount Kalisa, where Shiva himself gave him the stones. Also not made up. Not entirely. Seems like a mispronunciation or a misspelling.
Mm-hmm.
This is most likely a reference to the Indian Vedic scholar Adi Shankara, so with an H, Shankara, who is credited with uniting the people under the Hindu faith. He lived in the 8th century and was a devout believer in Shiva. He didn't care. The reason is because he didn't care for Buddhist philosophers. But by the 14th century, he was seen as an avatar of Shiva. So after he passed away in the 8th century, many centuries later, he and Shiva became intertwined because of how he united all of India under Hinduism.
Sure.
This real life person didn't climb Mount Kalisa, however, which is most likely because there is no Mount Kalisa.
Mm-hmm.
That is not a real mountain that exists.
Sure.
There is a Mount Kailash, though,
mm-hmm.
which seems to be the closest approximation, at least when you look it up in Google. When you type in where is Mount Kalisa located, it shows up with this mountain.
All right.
So there's a bit about this mountain that leads me to believe that this is probably the mountain that Indiana is talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So Mount Kailash is believed to be a holy mountain where Shiva lives. Now, kind of like Mount Olympus in Greek mythology, how the gods live on top of it. While no stories of Shankara were ever written of him climbing this mountain, it is close to Kedarnath, which was the last place anyone saw Shankara. So he passed away at a temple there. So it has a prominent Hindu temple that worships Shiva. Mostly it's believed to be a very holy mountain, so Hindu people don't climb it.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't want to incur the wrath of Shiva. However, someone did climb it in the 11th century. This is the only record of someone climbing it, or the earliest record of someone climbing it was in the 11th century, so a few centuries after Shankara passed away. And it was a Tibetan Buddhist yogi named Milarepa. Yeah. I don't want to talk about him anymore, so we're fine there. I mean, there's nothing to really say because he's not really part of this whole mythology, right? He's not Shankara. Sure. He's not Sankara.
Sure.
So all of that kind of all of that seems to have come together to make what the Temple of Doom story is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we talked about it last week, how they had access to encyclopedias, not Wikipedia or Google or things like that. And so it feels like this was if we're to take it on face value, it feels like a lot of what they came up with for Temple of Doom was a lot of half remembrances of Indian mythology. You know what I mean?
Very, very passive way of interpreting it. Obviously, not contacting an expert for this one.
Right, exactly. There was no. I'm sure there was no expert. I couldn't find an expert either talking about this one. Maybe there was that we don't know who's uncredited, but I didn't find anyone who took credit for this.
Sure.
So the Sankara Stones in the movie have like these crystals, have like these diamonds inside of them that glow when they're brought together. We see it on the image down below, and they have immense power, which is what Indiana uses to beat Mola Ram at the end. Indiana says, Indiana says, "You have betrayed Shiva," and the stones light on fire and fall into the abyss, into the ocean. It's not an ocean; it's a river.
I knew what you meant.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that is made up because there's no direct one-to-one story of how. So unlike the Ark of the Covenant, when we talked about how the idea that the Ark was left in Egypt, that is one of the theories of what happened to the Ark afterwards, after the temple was destroyed. But for here, there seems to be no one-to-one story of Shankara going up this mountain, talking to Shiva and being given these stones, which is probably why I gave them the credit of like, oh, the Sankara stones are different. They were meant to be different than the Siva Lingas, and they were mistaken as such.
I don't think they are. I mean, just like thinking in 80s film terms, and especially with that good old George Lucas quote, like it feels very much of the kind of thing where they just appropriated what they needed to in order to make it legible for the film, but that the intention still derives itself from the same thing.
Sure.
I think having the guy say Shiva Linga is a nod to what they are actually supposed to more or less come from.
Mm-hmm.
But again, you work all the way down to Sankara because Harrison Ford doesn't like saying gibberish. I mean, and that's derogatory of me to say because I don't mean like the Indian language is gibberish, but he doesn't like saying words that are hard for him to say.
Right. I mean, he mumbles a lot, right? He's got a very mumble a voice about him.
Right. And so he doesn't like saying complicated words to him.
And he was talking about this is a different thing altogether. So you can make the case that like Sankara and Shankara are meant to be the same person. It's just a mispronunciation on the scriptwriter's part. They forgot that it's meant to be spelled Shankara.
Mm-hmm.
So it does seem like maybe there's an amount of, would you say, misappropriation here?
Yeah, just I think just we're at that time period where they're not exactly being thoughtful about how they're interpreting cultures that, let's be generous and say, that they don't pay a lot of attention to.
Yeah, I mean, that's true.
And so it's not surprising that, this would just be like, kind of get your gathered like 1-page docket. What are we basing this on? Translate that into a script.
Yeah.
And this is what you end up with.
It's kind of a bummer too, because I think Temple of Doom I've come to appreciate later in life, and I think most people have in the world. And there's a sense of like, we talked about in our review of Temple of Doom, where during the dinner scene, there's like a completely separate movie happening with Willie and Short Round, where they're just being disgusted about Indian food, and none of it is real Indian food.
Right. Yes.
So there's an amount of, this film does have a lot more cultural appropriation and kind of making light of certain cultures that the other films don't. To an extent.
I mean, to an extent, yes, obviously, because it's prominently featuring, Indian culture at the front. and others are usually most of the time featuring Americans and Germans. And so like and the Germans can be treated however they want because they're Nazis at the time. So like there's not a ton of or like even go to Crystal Skull and you bring in Russians. Like, you know, there's not as much to. I think part of it is also that, you know, here we are specifically almost entirely inside of and like let's be clear, you know, this is not what this episode is about. Let's be clear that there is also some appropriation in the opening as well when we're not in India but we're in China. There's some appropriation there as well. So there's just kind of like an in general like East Asian, Indian, Chinese, like not so great in the way that they're handling this, but because the entire thing takes place there, like there's no globe trotting in this one.
Right.
So like you are embedded in the culture. So like what they are doing with the culture is far more noticeable here.
That's a good point. And, you know, you look at stuff what George Lucas was trying to do with the Adventures of Young Indiana Jones, and you kind of see it with the Indiana Jones films too. George Lucas was always interested in teaching people about other cultures and other societies. And he takes a far more, I mean, it still stumbles, don't get me wrong, but I think he takes a far more nuanced hand when he gets to the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles than when we get here. And so that's kind of why I brought up that quote, because it's weird because he's like, he brings up this idea that the Sankara Stones, he's talking about the Sankara Stones as if they are real when they are not. There's hundreds of Sivalingas. There's 5 Sankara Stones.
Well, and like, let's give him a little bit of credit, right? Let's say that like he knows when they started that this is based on the Sivalingas.
Yeah.
Okay, let's give him that credit. He knows that. He knows that ultimately what they ended up translating into the script is the Sankara Stones.
Yeah.
Okay. And because he's been in production on the film for a long time, he ends up saying, yeah, this is, you know, it's based on something. This is real. You know, without getting into the nitty gritty of explaining, well, it's a term changed from this term, changed from X thing that's actually like this.
I almost kind of would prefer them to talk, because that's why I kind of was like, I spent so long on this report for it to be pretty short is kind of baffling to me. Well, not baffling to me, I cut a lot of stuff out. But like I spent so long on the report because I really wanted to know how they got from A to B, because I like the idea of, oh, we're extrapolating from this and this and this and this. That's why I did this report, to be like, oh, these are the parts that make up what the Sankara Stones created. I wish that there was someone in the production, and they're not going to talk to the writers of this film. Nobody's talked to those writers in years. Someone should check on them. Like, I think that, like, I want to see that story. How did we come up with this idea? Why did we come up with this idea? What was the thought process behind it? Where did the story of the Sankara priest going up this mountain that doesn't exist? Like, why did they choose the mountain that doesn't exist? Why did they misspell Sankara and meant to say Shankara? Is there a story lost in their encyclopedia that was just written and never found again? Like, I would love to know these stories, you know?
Sure. And I mean, like, Indiana Jones is not alone in this case of doing this kind of thing.
Sure.
And like saying the wrong words or changing facts to make a better film.
Mm-hmm.
A more
they did it with the Ark of the Covenant.
Huh?
They did it with the Ark of the Covenant.
Right, yeah, to make a more translatably literate film. It is how it goes.
Yeah.
It's very clear that, like, in terms of like, but what do the stones do? They were like, they do the same thing as the Ark of the Covenant. They channel the power of Shiva. And that is like the answer. It's just what do they do? And it's like, speak the words and the power of Shiva shall channel through the stones. Sure, the visual interpretation and everything is different, but like the ultimate, like, and what is the relevance? And it's like, it's the power of God. It's the power of Shiva.
It's the power of Shiva.
There it is. Right there.
Kali Ma. Speaking of Kali Ma, I do have more to the report. It's not a lot more. but I did find it interesting. If you want to keep going.
No, I think, like we've done it. Let's call it. Scrap it all up. Close the books. We're all done. Obviously, continue.
That's actually how we should end this. The book closing.
Hmm.
Can you do that? I'm asking a lot of you.
You mean like as a transitional thing?
Yeah.
That's not easy.
Oh, I just remember what my intro was going to be. 30 minutes in. All right, that's fun. We have fun here. Okay. Okay, so there is more information on all of this stuff that you guys can find. I've linked all the sources. They're probably below. Please go check out more stuff on this one. There's some pretty interesting stuff here. Again, like I'd like to dive more into Shiva specifically as a god. I think he's pretty fascinating. I love the idea of creation and destruction being part of the same god. There's also some stuff about how Shiva, it has multiple not hands, roles in their religion, which signifies like how people are multifaceted. And I'm like, wow, that's way more nuanced than I ever gave an ancient religion. An ancient religion, people still worship Hinduism, but still, it's fascinating.
That's what I was also going to say is like kind of, like the interesting thing is like there is, I think, unless you are doing direct representation, like at this time period, you get a lot of media works where, anything that is not within the Christian belief, right? Or Catholic, anything that's not very like Western or Eurocentric becomes kind of interpreted as ancient just because it's also old, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't still exist. Like that it's not still followed, but it like kind of still gets treated in the same way of like, that's old stuff.
But like people still worship Hinduism. Like this is it's
absolutely
not an ancient religion.
No, I know. I mean, like this is a commentary on like just media up until like, the late thousands. That like Western media specifically, that like, whenever you approach that thing, it'll be like, we treat this the same way we treat Greek mythology because it's just as old. And it's like, well, sure, but the Greeks don't still worship Zeus.
Yeah.
Hinduism still exists.
Okay. So the reason why I kind of kept it short is because I want to keep it focused on what Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was referencing. So, excuse me. So on that note, there's a couple more things that the movie does talk about that have some interesting mythological and historical context. So the only thing that I didn't dive into here is the Thuggee cult. Thuggee, Thuggee. So this is a real cult. Quote unquote cult. They did exist. They're described in the film as such. Modern day historians, however, this is fun. You'll get a kick out of this. Aren't sure if they were meant to be an organized group, like a group of cult, or just a group of people that were attacking British colonizers.
Nice.
So this is recently, by the way. This is only like a couple of years ago that we start to wonder, like, oh, wait a second. Was this an organized cult, or was this just people attacking their colonizers?
Was this just people saying eat the rich?
Was this just people saying eat the rich? Exactly. So I'm really happy we're doing this now because like it's only been in the 21st century that we've looked at this cult and go like, wait a second, I don't think this was an organized cult. It does sound like something. This is the reason, because it does sound like something the British would make up because, quote, everyone in India loved them. So, when they came to colonize India and, oh, everyone loves that we're here. We've colonized you now. Oh, but these guys are a cult because they're a bunch of radical cults. They just want to go on. And it sounds like something that they would make up for, because if you think about it, it really does sound like something that would make up to send to like the Queen of England and be like, hey, this cult is attacking us. Send reinforcements.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. They'll be like, yeah, they're a dangerous cult. Ooh, man, we don't even know why they're doing it. It's crazy. So
Yeah,
nuts. Just came
everyone
out of
loves
nowhere.
us.
They're a cult that just believes in attacking us. It's weird. Why would they?
And so like I fall on that side because I think that's probably what happened. But
Almost
there's
definitely.
right, but there's a lot of reports about how the Thuggee cult was a organized thing and they worshipped Kali, and I'll get into a little bit. There is also no evidence to support that they did ritualistic killings, despite what the movie will say.
Okay.
Um, and the word Thuggee, quote Thuggee, comes from the Hindu word Thagi, Thagi, which means swindler or deceiver. This is also where we get the word thug. So that's
Nice.
fun. In case
Yeah.
anyone cared.
It's a cool
So
fact.
yeah, I thought so. So they so they were told. So the British believed that they seemed what happened was the British believed that they worshipped the god Kali and did ritualistic killings. There was never any evidence to support the ritualistic killings, and there is now coming to light that there probably was no evidence that there was a cult.
Mm-hmm.
So it's generally accepted that if there was an organized cult named the Thuggees, they worship the Hindu god Kali. But just from what I've read, since worshiping Kali is pretty common throughout India, it seems like the British made it up because Kali is not an evil god.
Right.
But like the British see Shiva, the good god,
Right.
Kali, the bad god. But that's not how that's not how people who
Yeah, they
worship them
just
see them.
needed a bad thing.
They needed a bad thing. So like the whole Kali Mon ritualistic killings, that's all made up for the movie, obviously. And even then, like it was still like, oh, they probably didn't kill people ritualistically.
British suck.
The British suck, don't they? But hey, if you guys are
certain old terms, I guess I won't comment too much on the British at large now, but Jesus.
But I mean, when they were like colonizing the whole world, like the sun never sets on the British Empire or whatever. Was that the Roman Empire?
I don't remember.
And when they were trying to colonize all these worlds, like they would look. We talk about it all the time. Like they would look at these civilizations as other, as lesser. Like when we came to America and when we came to the North America and we saw these Native Americans, indigenous peoples, we saw them and we looked at looked at ancient civilizations. Not even that. We looked at ancient civilizations like the Mayans, the Egyptians, who built massive structures that the more civilized world couldn't even dream of.
Yeah,
and we said, oh, they're savages. They need us. No, they never needed you.
right. It's because they wore different clothes.
Freaking the Spanish could never build the pyramids.
It's very true. I mean, it's not the time or place for this, but like colonizers are always bad.
Yeah, I mean, we say that, but we're American. We're white people who live in America.
We are. We can look back at history and say colonizers are bad.
That's true.
If I had the choice, I would have made it so the Native Americans were not massively decimated by the British and the Americans. Like I would totally change that if I could.
Yeah. Yeah, and so kind of going back to like this idea of like it really feels like, especially now looking back on history, it really feels like the British made up this idea of this cult because they didn't want to be seen as the bad guy. They didn't want people back home to see themselves as the bad guys.
Right. So you get the people writing this script and they're like, ooh, a cult, you say? Ooh, yeah. Kali, and does no further looking into it whatsoever.
Right. Because again, worshipping Kali is very common in Hinduism. Right. He is not, there's nuance in the Hindu religion that doesn't exist in a lot of other religions, specifically the Christian religion.
Someone somewhere related to this film, even if they were an extra, went, actually, worshipping Kali is very common, and they were like, shut up! Don't say that.
Yeah, and like the kid
is done.
the kid even says on the little Maharaja says, like, that's what he says in the script. That's not me talking, saying that's not me being racist. Well, it's a little bit because it's racist. Whatever, it doesn't matter. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. So the the kid even says, like, oh, I heard about this horrible thuggy cult in the history, and they're talking to this British captain who the British captain is like, oh yeah, I'm just checking on the people, and he's like, yeah, don't worry, there's no more thuggies. All the thuggies are bad. Don't worry about it.
Checking on this province that I consider mine.
Yeah. And then the British save the day at the end of the movie. This movie's kind of problematic.
That does suck a little bit.
That's a little bit, doesn't it? All right. So while
the British will show up in numbers to save the white man, and the white woman, but they won't show up in numbers to provide food to the village that's starving.
Yeah. But the stone saves the village.
I guess like good for the British that they at least let all those kids go home instead of enslaving them.
They did the bare minimum.
Bare minimum.
All right. While Shiva symbolizes Purusha, the universal unchanging aspect of reality, or pure consciousness, Kali represents Prakrita. Yeah, probably.
Okay.
The nature or matter. So things, basically things. So Shiva, kind of a more existential god, whereas Kali is a more physical god.
Sure.
The two of them are seen as necessary sides to all of reality. So they need to exist in tandem, otherwise there is no reality.
Mm-hmm.
Kali is meant to be a feminine counterpart to Shiva, so Kali is a she. She is regarded as the ultimate manifestation of Shakti, the primordial cosmic energy, and the mother of all living things. The goddess is stated to destroy evil in order to defend the innocent. So, does that sound like something an evil cult would worship? Right?
I mean, yes, to people who don't do the research.
Right, to people who don't do the research. And it sounds like something that they heard it. If you are being attacked by a cult that worships Kali, you're probably not the good person.
Right.
Is probably what happened there. Do you want to know what Kali Ma means?
Absolutely.
All right, it means divine mother.
Sorry, just in context of the movie, knowing that divine mother, heart comes out, divine mother.
Yeah,
yeah, that's not surprising.
I looked that up.
Cool, like in a ignorant way, like Kali Ma sounds cool the way they do in the movie and take the heart out.
I like that the series is basically just us realizing how ignorant these films are. So anyway, so that's what Kali Ma means. Now everyone knows. Happy to share that. So anyway, so basically when you look at like Kali Ma and Kali as a goddess, this doesn't seem to track with what the British were saying about the thuggies. So that's just more fuel to the fire that the whole thuggy cult thing was made up.
Yep.
But that's it. That's my whole report.
I'm gonna think about that for a while.
The thuggy cult thing. Oh, the divine mother. Yeah, like literally translated as divine mother, because Kali is a god and then Ma is mother.
Yeah.
So it sounds cool, but it makes no sense.
Right.
Why is he taking out his heart to the? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The answer is they didn't look it up.
You tell me.
I don't have that answer. Again,
the answer, frankly, like in terms of both that and the voodoo, is like you can make them because of ignorance and xenophobia. Let's be honest. You can make bad guys based in a territory like this, in a culture like this, seem more brutal and scary visually than the Nazis, because the Nazis, like, the Nazis, how they're bad. Everyone hates the Nazis. You have your context there, but there's so much othering and xenophobia still about these cultures and like what they believe. So it's really scary because like scary. For the time period, like the idea of like, well, voodoo, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the using the doll and stuff. And so like you can just kind of make whatever you want out of that because it's less familiar.
Right. I mean, that goes back to the George Lucas quote, right? Like, in a way, he's saying the same thing. Oh, people didn't respond to Temple of Doom because they didn't understand it like they could the Holy Grail.
Right. This feels far more like, whereas like Raiders of the Lost Ark is based in like both the textual history of the Ark of the Covenant and then like for its bad guys, the actual historical context of the Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
This one is entirely riding inside of like, not so much a little bit, clearly from your report, a little bit of factual, like what is the history of the belief in this area and their lore and this kind of thing. And their religious beliefs, but it's more because of all the other stuff that's just not based on anything. It's more based on the scary stories that would get told about these areas that are probably never true and are the kinds of things that like the British would say, like, oh yeah, lots of dangerous cults there. Rip your heart out, man. Fear of the Jungle. And this isn't new either. Like, to Indiana Jones' credit, like they are adapting something because it's Indiana Jones. Like, you're going for that pulpy flavor. You're going for that pulpy adventure flavor. Guess what? Lots of those pulp adventures end up in jungles. Lots of them end up doing things with Eastern Asian and South American and these kinds of cultures and making them like this, because there's this sense of you can kind of do whatever you want to make it as scary as you want because nobody cares or is familiar enough to know fact from fiction of what you're applying. I mean, so you just make this place like totally, almost like blank slating it to the point where you can just paint whatever imagery you want on it because it's so othered.
Right. I mean, that's why people who say Temple of Doom is their favorite Indiana Jones films say it is because it's the one that takes place and it's the one that more closely matches that pulp adventure feeling that they were going for with Raiders. Like, it's set in a jungle. It's very similar to there's the movie. What's the movie with Kurt Douglas, Romancing the Stone. Like, it's very similar to like those types of films where it's like, oh, this is a hero in a jungle in another world, in another place, taking audiences to a world they've never seen before.
Right. So in many ways, like Temple of Doom kind of can slide under a pass on a lot of it because it's like the goal of Indiana Jones is to be a send of those pulp stories, specifically the trilogy, because of the time period that it's supposed to be set in. These are the kinds of stories we were telling on radio shows at that point in time. Right. They were exactly like this. This is exactly the kind of shit they were doing. So Indiana Jones gets to do it too. The goal is not necessarily to be accurate.
All right. Well, I'll tell you my sources now. Sources are Indy in the Classroom, The Archaeology of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Very good source. I really enjoyed reading that one.
Cool.
Star Wars Explained, The Real History of the Sankara Stones. Basically 10 minutes of this.
Who wrote these?
Oh, I just have the links.
Okay. For future reference, you should probably put down the authors.
Okay, I will put down the authors from now on. I have the links. The links are down below. Please check them out. These are good. These are good resources. And in the future, I will say the authors of said articles. Empire Magazine, The Real Story Behind the MacGuffins. It's just kind of fun. They have all 4 of them. Encyclopedia.com, The Thuggy. There's just an encyclopedia.com article on the Thuggy. Medium.com, Shiva and Adi Shankara. That's one that I am actually now regretting not putting who wrote that, because Medium.com is kind of a crowdsourced articles section. I have an account there. I don't really use it. But this person wrote a really powerful story about how Adi Shankara and Shiva's story helped them. So please check that one out. And I regret not putting in the author. I guess I could click on it. Let's see what happens when I click on it. Oh, here we go. Akshay Om wrote that one.
Nice.
And there you go. So yeah, cool. Well, now I lost this. Now I lost my article. regret doing this.
Definitely check out our links, folks. Always want to support the works that help us know what the heck we're talking about enough to do a show like this.
Yeah.
Just enough, though. We're not experts.
No, that's true. I am relaying expert information, but I'm not.
Yeah, this is a side gig to our side gig. So,
Express's article, Indiana Jones and Indiana Jones, George Lucas, Temple of Doom, Sankara Stones were a bit of a reach. That's the article where I got the quote from. The Indiana Jones Wikipedia page on the Sankara Stones, Britannica article on Shiva, and learnreligions.com. What is Shiva Linga? Oh, yeah. There you go.
Cool. I am more informed.
I'm glad. And so next time we're going to be talking about the Holy Grail. Like I said, I was going to do a bit on the Dial of Destiny, whatever that was going to be. When I initially conceived of this idea, the Dial of Destiny was way in the it's not the review. It's way in the future at that point. But now that not many people have seen it, there's a lot of talk about what actually the Dial of Destiny is. I think it's called the Archimedes Dial, but yeah. So I haven't looked too much into it because I don't want to spoil the movie. So we'll talk about that after the next two, which will be the Holy Grail and the Crystal Skulls, but those episodes will be out after Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. So stay tuned.
Yeah. So in the meantime, when this comes out, we're talking about Dial of Destiny. So
yeah,
go listen to what we thought about that movie. We haven't seen it at the time of recording, but we will.
Well, yeah, probably by the time this comes out, that'll be the next Fake Nerd Podcast episode. Will probably be Dial of Destiny. Yeah,
that's why I'm saying it.
Yeah, of course. Hey guys, if you guys want to hear us talk more about Indiana Jones, there are 2 Cinephile episodes. That is our movie. That is our kind of our movie discussion series on here on YouTube or on our Fake Nerd Podcast feed, where we've talked about the 4 Indiana Jones films. You want to get our thoughts on Raiders and Temple and Crusade and Crystal Skull. Check those out. Those were a lot of fun to do. Yeah. And Real Score Indiana Jones episodes are coming. So plenty of Indiana Jones stuff if you're interested.
Conversation.
Oh, yeah, Conversation. I've talked, that is out now. You can check it out. I talked to Ken Knapsack, who is a good friend of mine. Ken Knapsack is currently also going through the Indiana Jones films on his podcast, Force Center, which is a Star Wars podcast. He's doing Indiana Jones. So I had him talk about Indiana Jones and his fandom and why he likes Indiana Jones. I'm going to take away the Sankara Stones. He's talk about Indiana Jones and his fandom and being a fan of Indiana Jones and kind of just his thoughts on the franchise and the specific movies. Really good conversation. I really enjoyed talking to him. Please check it out. That's just one of the many Indiana Jones things I've been doing on this podcast in the lead up to Dial of Destiny. Okay, so that'll do it. I guess if there's nothing else.
I have nothing else to add.
Cool. So of course as I've said, there's plenty of other shows on this network. I listened to many of our Mythellaneous episodes when Mythellaneous was just our second show. And so now we have many shows. So there's Fake Nerds Watch, which is starting up again. If you guys want to check out Fake Nerds Watch, which will be Star Trek Strange New Worlds. That's up now, the first episode. Probably the second episode by the time this goes up. Maybe. We'll see. And Secret Invasion will probably be around this time also. So check that out. There's, of course, Basement Arcade and Basement Arcade Pause Mini, our 2 video game shows. Animation Station and Fake Nerd Book Club. You can check out those shows as well on this channel. Audio and video, if you're listening to this on audio, there's feeds you can check out, things like that. Our TeePublic and our Patreon if you want to check us out and support us financially, or you can find everything on our website. Everything I mentioned is readily available on our website, which is our new website. It's up now, fakenerdpodcast.com. Check it out. Worked really hard on it. And if you want like an easy place to just know where you can listen to or watch to any of these shows or support us, it's all there. Thank you to Jeremy Bellucci. That, by the way, that was my intro. I was going to be like, hey, how about that intro?
Oh, I see.
So thank you to Jeremy Bellucci for doing our new. We had music in the last season, but this is a new theme tune that we have leading us into the show. Thank you to Sparks Witty. I never thank you for our opening graphics, and I feel like that's an oversight. I think I need to do that now.
It's fine.
But thank you. You made a great opening. It looks awesome. I think. I hope other people do too. But you can find, of course, Jeremy Bellucci at Jeremy Bellucci _ Rec of Time. He did the theme music. He's done the theme music for all of our shows, and he's on the Real Score. He is one of the hosts of the Real Score. So check him out.
Yep.
And thank you to Sparks Witty, and thank you to Mike Matola, who did the logo for this show and a few of our other shows. You can check him out at Mike Matola on Instagram and TikTok. You can find us Twitter and Instagram at Mythellaneous P. I used to spell it out. I'm not gonna. Mythellaneous P is linked below. Click it. Follow us. You can check that's on Instagram and Twitter, or you can find us at mythellaneouspod@gmail.com. That's the Mythellaneous feed. That's the Mythellaneous socials. Of course, Fichtner Podcast on all the socials for that's the hub. Fichtner Podcast is the hub for everything. So if you want more, it's there. I'm at BT McClure on Instagram and Twitter. I also write for CBR.com, AtomicGeekdom.com, and KaijuRamenMedia.com, where I'm also the editor. Sparks, where can people find you?
You can find me chanting Divine Mother at Sparks Witty on Instagram and Twitter, SPARKZ Witty.
Subscribe to us on your podcatcher of choice, and make sure to like this video and subscribe. And until next time, what did I say? Oh, yeah.
Divine Mother.
Keep chasing that fortune and glory.